Welcome back to Nutrapreneur, where we dive deep into the innovations transforming the nutraceutical landscape. I'm your host, Bethany. Today, we're honored to have Christopher Burres, the visionary co-owner of MyVitalC, join us. Christopher and his team at MyVitalC are at the forefront of ESS 60 research, producing high-quality ESS 60 products aimed at enhancing human and pet health. Their commitment to purity, safety, and advanced manufacturing sets them apart in the nutraceutical industry. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Bethany, thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to be joining your podcast. Anything that's talking about the nutraceutical market and making it better. To be honest, we'll probably get into some of the story that my business partner and I tried not to get into the nutraceutical space because it was so very different. And we'll say, I think politically correctly, we can say challenged. Like there's lots of challenges in this industry, not just legislative, not just FDA, but challenges with the people who participate in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think first off, it'd be great for you to just share with us how MyVitalC started in a home garage and then evolved into this world leader.
Yeah. So I actually just finished my book, Live Longer and Better. And it's all about the story that I'm about to tell, right? With a lot more details and kind of polished up by my co-author as a two-time New York Times #1 bestseller. So although I wrote the story, he polished the prose behind it. I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, and I went to the University of Houston because my dad moved here when I was starting college, and I studied mechanical engineering because it was the fastest way to the highest salary so that I could then become an entrepreneur. Two things went wrong with that plan, again outlined in the book. One of them was that engineering is a really tough discipline, and it took me 6 years, not 4 years, to finish. Now, I did also get minors in computer science and math, but it still took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to. And then the next is I actually started a company before I got out of college. So I never really got the opportunity to become an engineer, earn that engineering salary so that I could then become an entrepreneur. It happened before I even got out of college. And what we did, really, my business partner was working at the University of Houston, and he was separating a molecule that they had just discovered. And one day, his professor, actually, Dr. Paul Chu's, pretty famous in superconductivity world, he came in and said, "Hey, you guys are young kids. This molecule is selling for $6,000 a gram." By the way, this is back in 1989. So, significantly higher price than gold. It still is higher price than gold today. You guys should go start a company. And my business partner is from an entrepreneurial background. And so he basically just said yes and started the process of starting that company. And I got involved because as a mechanical engineer, I was supporting the build out of the equipment necessary to manufacture this molecule. Now, what is this molecule that you're talking about, Chris? Well, if you're watching, I'm holding up a molecule or a model of a molecule, obviously. And if you're listening, just imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So we have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. This molecule was actually discovered here in Houston. That's where our lab is based. It was discovered at Rice University, and the three scientists who discovered the molecule actually went on to win the Nobel Prize in 1996. So this is a model of a Nobel Prize winning. I mean, the molecule can't win the Nobel Prize, but you get what I'm saying. This is a Nobel Prize winning molecule. And the molecule is amazing, right? It performs as well or better in almost every application. It makes better inks, it makes better batteries, it makes better tires, it makes better photocells. And this is usually when people are like, I thought we were talking about the nutraceutical space. At no point in my life have I looked at a car battery and thought, what component of that car battery should I be consuming every single day? Well, the story gets a little bit worse before it gets better. Because of the shapes on the exterior of the soccer ball molecule, they're reminiscent of benzene. A lot of people in this nutraceutical space will recognize that benzene is known to be toxic and is a known carcinogen. And for those reasons, they actually thought this molecule, and we call it ESS 60, was toxic. So they put it in a toxicity study. In that toxicity study, they gave, in this case, it was Wistar rats. They gave one test group water, one test group olive oil, and then one test group olive oil with the ESS 60 molecule. Instead of being toxic, the test subjects that were given the ESS 60, really the MyVitalC formula, lived 90% longer than the control group. So the single longest longevity experimental result in history. Now my business partner and I kind of transitioned from being happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientists, if there is such a thing, that's us, into getting into this nutraceutical space, this health supplement space. And as I mentioned, kind of alluded to, for about 4 years, we tried not to get into the space because the space is very different than how our ongoing business, like what we used to focus on, was delivering commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials to research institutions around the world. That ends up being a black powder that we ship to them. And everybody we ever shipped to, until we started getting into this kind of nutraceutical space, everyone had the equipment to test what we sold them, right? So the highest possible standards, lab scale standards, were applied to producing this ESS 60 molecule and delivering it to these research institutions. And in this kind of time period, I found a peer-reviewed published article that, and this was the period where we're kind of debating whether we wanted to get into this industry. I found a peer-reviewed published article that said 50% of the supplements that are on the market that they purchased and tested did not have in them what they said they had in them. Now, that sounds like a pretty bleak picture, but and I don't remember the specifics, but it could be as simple as, hey, this 1 gram of vitamin C, this tablet didn't have a full gram, right? Or had a little bit of vitamin. Like, it's not all doom and gloom, but it's not the accuracy you assume to be true when you're purchasing a health supplement. So that article, and just kind of our whole general mindset, we didn't get into the supplement industry. And really that publication came out in 2012. We started debating if we wanted to get into that industry in mid 2013. It was until the end of 2017 when a guy with a big YouTube following started talking about all the benefits he was getting, taking it on a daily basis. And then we started getting 10 phone calls a day. And that's the point where we asked ourselves 2 questions like, hey, this is a bigger entrepreneurial opportunity than we realized. First question that we asked ourselves is a moral question. Are we comfortable selling it? I take it. My wife takes it. Everybody on our team here takes it. By the way, that's not a requirement to work on our team. Like, you don't have to take it. But they do, right? Because they see the testimonials from the customers. They understand our lab processes because they have access. So yes, we're comfortable selling it. The moral question is taken care of. The next, as you know, FDA, FTC, you've got to dot a bunch of I's, you got to cross a bunch of T's, and we do that. And so really, it was the beginning of 2018 that we started bringing this molecule, this supplement ESS 60 to the market.
Yeah, that's a great, fascinating story. And, you bring up a good point. I think a lot of people are surprised to know that a lot of supplements on the market aren't testing as they should, just whether it's, they're not checking for stability or not inputting the correct amounts, all of those things. So you're definitely right about that. And exploring the rigorous testing and quality control at MyVitalC, how do you ensure the highest standards for your ESS 60 products?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the big things is we've been working with the molecule since 1991, right? So when we're a startup and we're manufacturing the molecule, all of our testing was really literally done by universities in the area because we just had relationships with the professors. And if we were selling them material regularly, like, hey, we just sold you that. Could you test us and give it, like, because we didn't have the budget. We weren't we were a shoestring company. Hey, we'll sell this to you. And when you test it, please share it with us because, we want confirmation that we made the right thing. And that was only a couple of years. Then we end up with our own HPLC, high pressure liquid chromatography. I think some call it high performance liquid chromatography. And this is the ideal way to test for this molecule. But even today, as we go into a GMP, a good manufacturing practice facility, and we're like, hey, we'd like you to make this tablet for us. We'd like you to put it in this whatever. So we've got tablets, right? They're in there. When we go to do that, their first responsibility as a GMP facility is to test it. Nobody really knows how to test this stuff. Like, we actually have to provide them usually the test location. We've got to provide them the HPLC column and the protocol, because nobody's really working with this molecule on a larger scale. Now, it's actually, I think, as important, or maybe more important, that you have the testing capabilities in-house. Because I'll be honest, we looked at this industry, and there's kind of an industrial side of this industry. And we looked at the products that this industrial side were manufacturing, and they were woefully low in concentration. And I think the reason is if your testing is an expense, you work to reduce it. But if testing is in your culture and you have the testing equipment on site, it just no longer is an expense. So we're testing batch after batch after batch. And one of the things that we realized, by the way, we have one of the longest production processes for a health supplement. It actually takes us currently 3 weeks to mix our ESS60 molecule in olive oil, right? In the original study, they mixed it for 2 weeks. And our current theory about people in this industrial space who are creating a subpar product, I'm very altruistic. So I don't want to believe that anybody's like shortchanging the customer. I think they're following the 2-week protocol and hoping that it actually generates what they think it's going to generate. But it was our ability to internally test. When you go from a small Erlenmeyer flask in this context to a much larger, 100-liter vat, the fluid dynamics are such that it takes longer. It just takes longer to mix. And how do we know that? Because we're able to test our product every hour. We're not having to send it out, at $100 or up to $200 per test. We're just doing that in-house. So I think hopefully that answers your question. Our focus is on delivering the same kind of laboratory grade products that we were delivering to research institutions around the world. How do we bring that same mindset into this kind of nutraceutical health supplement space?
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like it's a huge advantage for you to be able to test in-house, because even I know with my experience with third-party labs, sometimes they might not have the method, like you said, and they have to validate that method at their lab. And then it's such a long lead time, and you don't really have time to wait when you're trying to test out your process. So that's great that you can test in-house.
Yeah, and we really just didn't have a choice, because
Right.
as we were kind of developing into this kind of ESS60 expert, how do you test it? Well, you got to be able to test it regularly. Well, you can lean on your professors, right, that you have relationships on for only for so long. At some point, they're like, my job is to write papers, not to test your material. And so you've got to figure out how to bring that in-house. And we did that, for 30 years ago is when we brought that in-house, and have been continued to do that research to work on different columns. We actually sell the different columns that people might be interested in using so that they can test their products. So even in that industrial space, again, I'm very altruistic, but there really is no excuse. Like, you can buy an HPLC, you can buy a protocol. Well, actually, you can actually buy the equipment, the HPLC, and then the column, the HPLC column from us. We're happy to sell it to them. And we'd even share the protocols. Like, if you're concerned about the quality of your product, let us know. Like, that's what we do. We deliver value to this space, either the industrial space or kind of, we think of more the retail space, the ESS60 space.
Yeah, that's great. And you have a variety of ESS60 products. You offer some that are in olive oil, avocado oil, MCT oil. How do these different bases impact the efficacy and the customer health goals?
Yeah. So I think the first place to start is people were like, why olive oil? Right? Like, why did you choose olive oil? Well, that original study where the test subjects lived 90% longer than the control group, right? Single longest longevity experimental result in history. By the way, my lab provided the material. and we're mentioned in that original publication. So we are the foundation. Not only have we been producing the molecule for 30 years, longer than anyone else on the planet, we actually are the foundation of this arm of the industry, which is the kind of nutraceutical arm. So the reality is, and I lost my train of thought. It may come back here in 3, 2. What was your question again?
A lot of people were asking, you said, why olive oil?
Yeah. So why olive
I
oil?
have wondered why olive oil.
Yeah. And the reality is we provided the material to that study. It's out of the University of Paris. There have been some publications on the solubility of the ESS60 molecule in different oils, in different polar solvents. I think it had more to do with there's olive oil readily available in Paris, and the olive oil was actually out of Tunisia, which is what we use to this day. And so it just became a thing of convenience. And remember, this was a toxicity study, right? This was not how long are these rats going to live. They weren't looking at, some of the components that are absolutely amazing out of that initial study. Is a typical Wistar rat lives 32 months. And they have a known amount of tumor mass in their body. So the longer they live, the more tumor mass they have in their body. Even though the MyVitalC rats lived out to 62 months, right? Full 90% longer, none of them had any tumors, right? So this wasn't a study to talk about tumor suppression. Another component of the study, at one point, my director of research was like, Chris, this could have been 5 separate research papers, right? Like there's just so much content in here. Another aspect is they injected the test subjects with carbon tetrachloride. That's an immense oxidative stressor and really attacks the liver. And the only rats that recovered from that injection were the MyVitalC rats, right? This was not a study on, reducing oxidative stress in the liver of rats due to MyVitalC. This was a toxicity study. And one thing that's true about, at the very least, the first toxicity study is you don't give a little to the rats and see if they feel unwell, right? Like that's not the process of a toxicity study. You literally give as much as you can possibly give to them and then find out what happens. And then if they do have some adverse effects or death, right? Toxicity is often associated with death. Then you start backing off the dose so you can understand how much would be safe for humans to be working with this material. Because again, that study was done in the context of it's great in inks, batteries, tires, and photocells. Humans will have to work with it because it's going to be in those products. So what is the safe amount? What is the non-toxic amount? And at the end of the day, they ended up living 90% longer than the control group. So yeah, olive oil, I think, was a matter of convenience. And then you mentioned we do have different oils on our website. So we've got olive oil, avocado oil, MCT oil. And we always, if people are like, so what should I try? I'll share with you what you should try, and then I'll share with you my routine. But we always recommend that you start with the olive oil. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is we're a research-based organization, and all the research is on this ESS60 molecule in olive oil. The second reason is you can actually get more of this ESS60 molecule, that soccer ball-shaped molecule, into olive oil than you can in avocado or than you can in MCT. Now, my personal routine, and I can just share our most consistent testimonial. People take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. My personal routine is I put MCT in my coffee. So it's kind of a bulletproof. I don't know if you've heard of bulletproof coffee, right? You're in the space. So Dave Asprey, who I did actually get to interview for a longevity summit that went live recently. So he created bulletproof coffee that has ghee, so purified butter, and MCT. So I just, instead of using his MCT, I use our MCT with the ESS60 molecule in it. While that's blending, because it's oil and water, I'll take a little bit of our olive oil. And then for lunch, I'm usually having a salad, so I'll throw our avocado product on the salad.
This episode is brought to you by NutraPayments.com. If your business needs credit card processing that fully integrates with most major Nutra software platforms, offers the lowest industry prices, and has built-in features like recurring billing, $0 trials, and chargeback prevention, then visit us at nutrapayments.com for a free online quote. You talked about you wrote a book. So what inspired you to write a book about a molecule that has the potential to significantly extend life? And can you tell us more about this molecule?
Yeah. Well, the first concept behind the book was about how you might want to reinvent yourself because, as if you're going to live twice as long, because you might, right? Like with this initial study, 90% extension, you're getting close. Actually, there are some things in the study that you could probably tweak and they could have extended the lives even longer, we believe. So maybe you need to reinvent yourself because if you're going to live twice as long, like I was on a podcast yesterday and the guy was I think he was in his 40s, mid 40s. And he goes, yeah, at this age, I'm starting to plan the second half of my life. And I was like, well, aren't you actually planning the second 2/3 of your life? Right. Like that's why I put together the longevity summit. There is a quantum shift in the medical community's thought processes about living longer, about aging, and the fact that not only can we live longer and a lot longer, we can also live in a state that is not infirmed, in a state that is not debilitated. That certainly is something that is really hard for people to separate right now. So that was my initial thought process about the book. I knew I wanted to write a book. It was about the time of the pandemic. I don't fancy myself a writer, and so I knew I would need a co-author. One day, I ended up on the phone with this guy, Dr. Jerome Corsi, and it's a amazing conversation. You've probably had these. We're like, this is a great conversation. It's like professional and personal and fun, right? And you're, but part of you is like, what's going to happen next? Like, I don't see a path for us to be talking regularly. Are we just going to business associates and we'll hang up and never talk again? And while we were conversing, I Googled him, Dr. Jerome Corsi, and found out that he's a 2-time New York Times #1 bestseller. So to get on the New York Times bestseller list is a Herculean task. Like you've got to have a big audience, you've got to have, great authorship, your publisher's got to be amazing. Then to get to the New York Times #1 bestseller, like that's asymptotically harder, exponentially harder than getting just onto the list. And he's done that twice. So in my little brain, I was like, oh, that's why I'm talking to him. He's going to be my co-author. Well, turns out we had conversations and it worked out with what he's trying to accomplish, what I was trying to accomplish. And so Dr. Jerome Corsi is my co-author. I'll kind of finish this a little bit because I in my head, he was going to interview me, maybe look at some of the interviews that I have online, and he was going to go write a book, and then he was going to give it to me, and I was going to read the book, and I was going to go, this is a great book, we should publish it, right? Which the publishing deal was already in place. And then what happened is in the very first meeting, he's like, Chris, so you're going to need to write down your story. And I was like, well, I guess I'm writing a book. Like that's what's going to happen. And I felt good about what I was writing, and I felt even better after a 2-time New York Times #1 bestseller was like, I like your writing style. Like the prose needed to be fixed. Like he did a much better job. But I tried to teach lessons where I could, share the story of this Nobel Prize winning molecule, share stories of scientists at symposiums, at conferences yelling at each other because they disagreed on particular topics, which is, I don't know, was a different, I wasn't expecting that going into my kind of first symposium. But it is exactly what should be happening when people disagree, even on the science, because the science is always debatable. Not saying that things that are accurate are debatable. I'm saying the science behind them are things that need to be available to debate. So that's how I ended up, and that's what I ended up putting in this book. And the reason I did it is kind of twofold. I've always felt that as I accumulate information, I should share it. I love the phrase, a wise man learns from his mistakes. A truly wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And if I can facilitate other people by sharing my mistakes, because that's not a lot, but it's in the book, right? The mistakes that my business partner and I made through these last 30 years. If I can put that in a book and help somebody to be truly wise, then I want to do that. And the other reason is I really believe that when you start to teach, right? So when I write the book, when I teach the book, when I get on this podcast and share with you, that's when I truly start to cement that information in my mind, right? Like that's when you truly know a subject, is when you start to teach it. And so that's really why I wrote the book.
Yeah, and it sounds like it can reach a wide audience. Those up and coming entrepreneurs are probably interested in reading it. And then I think everyone is looking at how they can live longer and age better. I think sometimes you think, oh, living longer, I don't know if I want all of those negative aspects of aging. But if you can actually age better and, find that longevity, that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, and that's the goal. The goal is, one, cement the information in my mind, two, share these stories. And then I think kind of another goal is to start to help shift the the lay person's mindset about aging. That aging doesn't have to. So I tell people regularly this longevity story, right? Where the test subjects given our molecule, ESS60, lived 90% longer than the control group. And I get kind of two responses. The first one's kind of funny. New Yorkers will say, why would we want rats to live longer? This is horrible research. Chris, you need to bury this. You're even potentially an evil person for mentioning extending the lives of rats, right? So that's kind of funny. The other question I get is, why would I want to live longer? Like, what is the value of me living longer? And at first, this kind of confused me because I've always wanted to live to 125. And then I realized that what I was asking, would you like to live longer or a lot longer, right? Kind of by describing the paper. Um, but what they were hearing is, in an infirmed or debilitated state, how much longer would you like to live? And I think for many people, the answer to that question is not very long. I'd like to take care of my affairs, make sure everybody that is taking care of me is taken care of, and then, pass on, because I don't want to be a burden to those that are around me. I also just don't want to be in this debilitated state. But if I change the question, right, and I say, Bethany, if you could have the same mental capacity that you have today, and you could have the same physical capacity that you have today, or maybe even better, would you then be interested in living a lot longer? And what's the answer?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Yes. By the way, not everyone says yes. Like, there are people who don't say yes. And for them, I'm like, you need to focus on mindset. One of the speakers on my longevity summit was a mindset coach, one of my best friends and an amazing therapist. But talking about this mindset, like, what is it that you need to change in your life, so that you can enjoy and the thought of having more healthy years is exciting to you? Because that's just things you need to change in your mindset, and things that you need to change kind of in your day-to-day activities. Yeah. So really, the medical community is changing their mindset about, hey, you can live longer and you don't have to be debilitated in an infirm state. And that is part of the reason that I want to write this book, because that quantum shift, that longevity revolution, we're in the middle of it, and I want to help to push people into what I would say is the winning end of this, right? Like, living a lot longer for me, is the winning end.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you have a summit coming up. The Longevity Summit, I think, is a groundbreaking event. So, what motivated you to organize this summit, and what do you hope to achieve?
Yeah, so the motivation for the summit is still kind of a similar thing. One, I get to interview experts in longevity, so I get to shove information into my own brain. Two, I get to teach it, right? Because I have follow-up courses, and I've got I'm actually going back and listening to all of them. And so kind of selfishly, I get to teach it and cement that information into my head. Something really interesting about the Longevity Summit. If 7 months ago, Bethany, you had said, hey, Chris, you need to do a longevity summit, and you need to interview 55 experts in longevity, and 3 of them are going to be the most notable longevity and biohacking experts really kind of around. And just to give you some perspective, Dave Asprey, right, father of biohacking and the creator of Bulletproof Coffee, Dr. Stephen Gundry, four-time New York Times bestseller, Ben Greenfield, lesser known outside of longevity and biohacking spaces, but an unbelievable encyclopedia of knowledge. He's written 15, 17. I think we've lost count how many books he's written. He's amazing. If Bethany, if you had said, that's what you're going to do, Chris, 55 experts and those three big guys, I would have said, Bethany, listen, I'm more of the person who likes to set himself up for success, not for failure. So I don't know how I would get from 7 months ago to completion of that task. And yet here I am on the other side of it. And that's exactly what I've done. 55 experts. They're experts in longevity. Ben Greenfield, Dr. David Sinclair, not Dr. David, Dr. Stephen Gundry. I would have loved to interview Dr. David Sinclair. I did reach out to him. That didn't happen. And then, so Ben Greenfield, Stephen Gundry, and Dave Asprey. It just turned out to be an amazing event. Again, a lot of the event is about sharing this longevity revolution that we really are changing things, and there are things that you can be doing today to improve your health and help you get there's a concept called the terminal velocity of aging, and the concept is at some point every day we age, the medical community will extend our life by more than a day, right? And at that point, no one will die of natural causes, right? And just to throw out there, at some point, I believe there will be one person who does die of natural causes, and it will suck to be that person. I mean, they won't really know, right? Like they won't be here. But I want to be the person right behind them at the minimum, right? Maybe much farther back in the long line, because I think that we'll get there. And something that convinces me that we'll get there. In 1950, medical information doubled every 50 years. Today, medical information doubles every 73 days, right? So 4 times a year, we're doubling information. That's 16 times more information at the end of the year than we had at the beginning, right? Because it's doubling the information. That doesn't even take into account AI, because the AI is new to the, right? There's some people who are working with AI in medical. We know that already, but it's not in every lab. So this is a quantum shift in how much information is available. If there's something that you think the human body can do or we can do to the human body, it's going to happen a lot faster than we realize. And so that is a lot of what I wanted to bring really to kind of the public at large about longevity and this longevity revolution.
Yeah, and I think society as a whole wants information. They want to be educated. They want to know what they're putting in their bodies. And so I think that will be a great success for sure.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I know this podcast may not come out in time. If it doesn't, I'm going to figure out how to rebroadcast it. So we'll give you a link as we wrap up, and you can just submit, hey, add me to the list, add me to the Longevity Summit list, because we'll get this content back out. But it does, or did, depending on when this comes out, go live Monday, February 26th. Through March 3rd. And then there's an encore weekend, I guess it's March 9th, where all of that content will be available, and it's available for free. You just need to give your name and your email address.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm sure there will be a lot of interest in that. And you brought up the term biohacking. So how do longevity and biohacking intersect according to the insights that will be shared at this summit?
Yeah, in fact, I had a specific biohacker expertise, and frankly, when I did the summit in partnership with a company called Health Means, and they initially said, "Hey, if you want to host one, you need to interview 35 to 40 people." And in my head, I was like, "I'll hit 25. Like, I think I can do that. Hopefully they don't get too mad at me because I don't hit the 35 to 45 number." I interviewed Natalie Nadam, and she is a biohacker. Has a podcast out there like Superhuman Performance. I'm close on that name. But but she ended up introducing me to so many experts in the space. She's really the one that got me to the point where I interviewed 55 experts. So I owe so much to her, and actually just was in her Facebook group today, Superhuman Performance Facebook group, and thanking her for like all of the contributions that she made to this. I brought her in because she is kind of the quintessential biohacker to have some conversations, because I think some people, I mean, one of them, Dave Asprey, invented the word biohacking. And a lot of people think of hacking as a negative thing, right? They're concerned about hacking, or maybe they're concerned about, hey, this means Neuralink, putting chips in our head. I'm not cool with that. Or it means, robotic parts, and I'm not cool with that. And I don't think that's what it means. First off, just to kind of share some information, hacking is not always negative, right? We hear the bank got hacked. That's negative, right? We hear whatever service provider got hacked. That's negative. But, if you have a computer that runs at a certain speed and you decide to speed it up, you're a computer hacker, right? It doesn't mean you're out trying to break banks. It just means that you're hacking computers. You're hacking into the system and making it do things that it wasn't necessarily designed to do. Or maybe in the case of biohacking, that it was designed to do, but our current environments don't support it doing those things, right? So I think, one, biohacking is a good phrase. Biohacking could be as simple as, hey, right now I'm in Houston, it's 5 o'clock. In about 2 hours, really, white lights should start to dim in my house. You should have a blue light blocker on your cell phone. If you're going to continue working, you should have blue light filters on your monitors. By the way, most of these things are built into the devices, because blue light has a negative impact on your ability to sleep. What blue light tells your body is that it's noon, right? Like, so as the blue light's coming into your eyes, your body's going, oh, it's noon. Physiologically, it's noon, because that's when the most blue light exists throughout the course of a day. Well, it's not noon. It's time to start winding down and getting ready to go to bed. That's biohacking, right? But I just put on, maybe weird yellow glasses, but that's biohacking. So it can be that simple. And then when you think about longevity, I went back and listened to my interview with Natalie Nadam, and I asked her, do you have to be a biohacker for longevity? And we both kind of bounced the idea back and forth, and we ended up on, well, yes, if you live in modern society, right? Because there's a collection of blue zone people. These are people in different parts around the world who tend to live longer, who tend to have reduced incidences of heart attack, reduced incidences of strokes. And in these blue zones, like, they're far from biohackers, right? They're not wearing yellow glasses. They're not hacking anything. They're just living a life that's kind of optimized for the performance of the human body. But we don't have that, right? When you live I live in Houston, the fourth largest city in the country. We're going to pass Chicago soon, by the way, so we'll be the third. So Chicago needs to step up. I love Chicago. It's a great city. But if you live in a large city, right, you're just exposed to so many fumes and so much stress. Like, just getting to work can be stressful. These are things that you need to manage. And I really do think you need to biohack in order to optimize your life and health span if you live in this modern society. If you're out in the middle of the woods and you're walking 30,000 steps a day, by the way, you don't know you're walking 30,000 steps. It's just where grandma lives. So you walk to grandma's house every day, or whatever it is, that very kind of more natural environment. Maybe you don't need to be a biohacker, but I really do believe, city folk need to be biohackers if they want to optimize their health.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's great advice, and simple things that you can implement into your daily routine, I think, to improve your life essentially. I know many of us struggle with sleep, and just doing those few minor things could probably help.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it is that minor. There's an amazing book by Dr. Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. And I call it the Freddy Krueger of sleep books. You may remember Nightmare on Elm Street. The Freddy Krueger character scares people out of their dreams. Well, this book will scare you into your dreams, because it's 25 of research by a high level, at a prestigious university researcher, Dr. Matthew Walker, who's also an amazing speaker, by the way. But it scares you. All of his research is about what are the detrimental things that happen to your physiology, your mind, and your emotions when you don't get enough sleep? And I love his intro, because his intro is like, if you happen to fall asleep while you're reading this book, I will take that as a compliment, because you're listening to what the book says and you should be sleeping, right? Like you need to get, 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep opportunity per night. So yeah, sleep is incredibly important. And it's kind of um, also why I ended up putting the book together, because I'm going down the sleep path because our most consistent testimonial is related to sleep. I'm going down to, David Sinclair's book, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. And so I wanted to share all of this through the book and through the Longevity Summit.
Yeah, I know it's all great stuff. And Chris, once again, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a privilege to have you on Nutrapreneur and to hear about your pioneering work with MyVitalC and your contributions to the field of longevity. Your insights not only enlighten, but also inspire our listeners to think differently about health and aging. For those interested in learning more about MyVitalC and exploring their range of ESS 60 products, we'll include links in the show notes. And don't forget to check out the Uncovering the Secrets to Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms Summit for cutting edge strategies on extending your lifespan. Thank you, Christopher, for sharing your journey and expertise with us. To our listeners, remember to subscribe and share your thoughts on today's episode on social media. Join us next time for more compelling discussions on the future of the nutraceutical industry. Stay informed and inspired.